You've got hot water on demand, 6 kinds of shampoo, a soap aisle with 40 options you've never even opened. Now take all of that away. No bottles, no bars, no plumbing. And somehow, for 300,000 years, humans still didn't rot, didn't reek, didn't drop dead from something as basic as an infected cut. The picture in your head right now is probably a filthy, matted, disease-ridden caveman. You think that's what before soap looked like. Actually, the evidence says almost the opposite. This is the part most documentaries skip. Here's your first belief reversal. Cleanliness didn't start with a product. It started with a location. Archaeological sites don't scatter randomly across the landscape. They cluster. Rivers, lakes, springs. And it's not only because that's where the water was for drinking, it's because that's where the bodies were, every single day. Bathing wasn't a scheduled event. It was baked into the geography of survival. You lived near water because your body needed washing as often as it needed drinking. Now imagine you're standing at the edge of one of those rivers, 10,000 years before agriculture. You reach down, not for soap, but for sand. Wet sand, wood ash, ground straight into the skin. Mechanically, that's not primitive. That's an exfoliant. The exact same physical action a $40 skincare product performs on your face right now, minus the branding. Wait, that's only half the formula. Because scattered through the same landscape were plants most people walk past without a second thought. Soapwort, horsetail, crush them in water, and they foam. Not metaphorically, literally foam, almost exactly like a bar of soap does in your hands. These plants contain natural compounds called saponins, and somewhere across thousands of generations, someone noticed that specific plant in specific water did something none of the others did. Think about that for a second. An abrasive to lift the dirt, a foaming agent to carry it away. Those are the 2 core ingredients of soap. Full stop. That's the formula. And it was already assembled from raw material with 0 chemistry, 0 labs, 0 understanding of what a compound even was. Just attention, just repetition, just watching what worked and doing it again. Almost nobody talks about this part either, because the story doesn't stop at the skin. Your ancestors weren't only scrubbing their bodies. Dig into Neanderthal sites and you'll find something strange. Toothpicks. Carved from bone. Carved from wood. Grooves worn into fossilized teeth from the same repeated motion, over and over, for years. And layered onto that ancient plaque. Plaque that never got brushed away, so it fossilized instead. Researchers have found traces of plants with antibacterial properties. Not eaten by accident, chewed on purpose. At El Sidrón cave in Spain, researchers analyzing that fossilized dental plaque on Neanderthal remains found compounds from plants with no nutritional value at all. Plants that do one thing: fight infection. That means someone, tens of thousands of years before the word medicine existed, was self-treating an illness with a plant they'd learned. Somehow, actually worked. That's not survival by accident. That's a functioning, deliberate healthcare system, running on memory instead of pharmacies. And it didn't stop with Neanderthals. Walk the timeline forward to ancient Mesopotamia, and you'll find clay tablets describing people mixing water with a powdery ash-based salt to clean their bodies. The Akkadians went further, blending date palm, pine cone resin, and a plant called tamarisk into a cleanser built from an alkali, an oil, and an abrasive. Sit with that combination for a second. Alkali, oil, abrasive. That's not a precursor to soap. That is soap's chemical blueprint, assembled 1,000 years before anyone called it soap. The invention you were taught in school wasn't really an invention at all. It was a refinement, a tidier version of a formula humans had already been approximating with dirt, ash, and plants for longer than most of recorded history has existed. So if the chemistry was already solved, why do you still picture them as filthy? Here's something that gets left out of every hygiene through history video. For most of human existence, getting clean wasn't something you did alone. Picture 2 people sitting by a fire, one running fingers slowly through the other's hair, picking out dirt and lice, cleaning a scrape on someone's arm. That's not a spa day. That's the daily maintenance ritual that held small groups together. The same behavior you'd watch a chimp troop perform for hours if you sat and observed them. Grooming wasn't vanity. It was trust, built with hands, repeated every day. And it went further than survival. At Qafzeh cave in Israel, researchers found shell beads stained with red ochre, deliberately pierced deliberately strung, worn by people buried almost 100,000 years ago. That means someone sat down, colored those shells, drilled holes into them by hand, and wore them. Not to survive the next winter, but for how another person would look at them. Pride in appearance isn't a modern invention either. It's older than agriculture, older than cities, older than almost everything you'd call civilization. So hygiene wasn't a chore rushed through alone in a locked bathroom. It was public, shared, something done to each other, not just for yourself. Now here's the twist that undoes everything you just assumed. Scientists don't love admitting this, but once humans stopped moving and settled into dense farming towns, hygiene often got worse, not better. Waste piled up where people slept. Water sources sat next to that same waste. Disease moved faster through a crowded, static village than it ever did through a small band of 20 people who packed up and moved every few weeks. Think about that. A nomadic group bathing in a fresh river every few days, small enough that waste never accumulated, may have lived cleaner day to day than the advanced agricultural societies that showed up thousands of years later. Historians studying early cities have found that clean water and reliable washing were often luxuries. Even relatively recently, people went far grimier than you'd assume, and it had nothing to do with how primitive they were. You think progress is a straight line? Actually, hygiene got worse before it got better, and it only recovered once someone bottled what nomadic humans had been doing by instinct all along. So here's the question that actually matters. Are you cleaner than they were, or just more dependent? You panic if you miss one shower and call it feeling gross. They built an entire system out of ash and sand and plants and made it a shared ritual instead of something to rush through alone before running out the door. You've got dermatologist-approved bottles with ingredient lists you can't pronounce. They worked out the same underlying chemistry: an abrasive, a foaming agent, an alkali, an oil, through nothing but trial, error, and paying attention to what actually worked, generation after generation, with no lab and no label. Go back to that river now. No bottles, no plumbing, just sand in one hand and a crushed soapwort leaf foaming in the other. That's not a scene of deprivation. That's the original formula. Running exactly as designed. Tens of thousands of years before anyone thought to sell it back to you. We didn't invent cleanliness, we just put it in a bottle, and forgot our ancestors already had the formula figured out.